You know, you both falsely claim in your video that the Republican Party is calling our generation, Gen Z, stupid. But in fact, it's actually quite the opposite. Kamala Harris, the current vice president of the United States, who both of you just endorsed this past week for re-election, word for word called 18 through 24-year-olds, aka our generation, Gen Z, stupid. Her words, not mine. Take a look.
What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid.
I disagree with her on that. We should all be calling her out on that. But guess what? You guys won't, because you take a paycheck from the DNC.
Yeah.
Maybe next time, before you throw stones and glass houses, you should take a look at what your own party's leaders are saying.
Folks, we need to talk today about this new poll showing that Gen Z, or at the very least Gen Z men, let's go boys, are not nearly as liberal as they're made out to be by either left-wing or right-wing media. Because I think a lot of conservatives, and understandably so, have this perception that, wow, look at these young people you see on TV, they're so crazy. When they take over the country, it's going to be a left-wing nightmare and there's no hope. And like I said, I fully understand where that sentiment comes from. But as I've been saying for a very long time, and some people don't always believe me, there are a lot more conservatives in our generation than we think there are. The problem is that the GOP simply does not know how to reach them, or really, frankly, who they even are. And we're going to talk all about that in today's video. But let me first show you the poll here. This is from the University of Michigan. And as you can see, they've polled 12th grade. So this is 18 years old, you know, fresh out of high school, 12th grade girls and boys over the course of several years, and asked them, you know, are you liberal? Are you conservative? And so check this out. First, we get what we should expect, okay? And everyone basically knows this. This shouldn't surprise anyone. They polled 12th grade girls, aka young women. And this is what you see. Obviously, there's a huge gap. Most Gen Z women are liberal. That shouldn't shock anyone. Anyone who's around Gen Z women, and even you older people who see it on TV, you know exactly how they are. And you can kind of see it's always been that way. Young women have always been liberal because women in general tend to be more liberal than men are. And there's reasons for that we'll talk about in a second. This, however, is what is more surprising and, you know, very good to see. They're asked the 12th grade boys. And as you can see, over the course of several years since the 70s, boys have basically been in the middle. Some years they're more liberal, some years they're more conservative, but it's a pretty small gap. But as you can see here, look right here, right? Since 2015, there's been a huge spike, even as the school system and the pop culture gets more and more left-wing, and that's what's interesting. There's a huge spike of young men, 12th grade boys out there who are identifying as conservative, and now you see where it is in 2023. There's a gap. The majority of 12th grade boys, at least according to this Michigan poll, are identifying now as conservative. And by the way, I know some people may be totally shocked by that, but anyone who truly at least pays attention or is involved in our generation or really gets us fully knows that this is not surprising to anyone. In fact, this is what I've been trying to tell people on this channel for a very long time, which is that there is a very large base of disaffected young Gen Z men, although I didn't even realize they were as big a majority as they are. But there have always been this very large base of disaffected young men. And I think the reason you're seeing that gap actually expand more and more becoming conservative is because more and more every year, men are left behind by society. Men are more often told how toxic they are. We live in the matriarchy, right? You know, all this different stuff. As masculinity becomes more and more under attack, this is what's very interesting. You're actually seeing a lot more young men now drifting over to the conservative camp out of that feeling of being disaffected. And I wish the GOP truly understood who these people are and why this is happening, because you know, you very often hear from older people, from conservatives, from Fox News, and I'm not saying it's not wrong, but you very often hear Gen Z is so stupid. Look at all these stupid young people. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of stupid young people in my generation. I think, though, this may be a politically incorrect thing to say, but it's very true. The truth is, most of the people that you identify in our generation of being stupid Gen Zers are the women. Okay, like as you can see from the statistics here, right? When we talk about young people being so liberal, en masse, it's the women who are the liberals, right? Now, the reason why the Gen Z liberal women dominate youth culture over Gen Z conservative men is partially because the left is very good at mobilizing the young woman. right? You understand what I'm saying there? And part of the reason they do such a good job at appealing to young women is because, and again, this might be kind of politically incorrect, but it's true. It's because, frankly, let's be real about this. Young women are very susceptible, and more so on average susceptible than young men, to emotional and irrational messaging, right? And the left's, all of the left's ideas are what? Emotional and irrational, and they're very good at making emotional, irrational appeals. And so this is why when we look at how liberal, quote unquote, our generation is, that's partially because the left wing, the Democrats, do such a good job at mobilizing the young woman to vote for them, to go and protest, to do all of this stuff. And meanwhile, you look on the flip side, all the young men in our generation, not all of them, but a huge number of them are conservative. But what is the conservative movement doing to mobilize them? What does the GOP do to go out and get their votes? This is what I've been saying is the problem for so long, right? I have been saying, Republicans, when you talk about going after Gen Z, look, the women, let's be real, a lot of them, they're kind of a lost cause, okay? Let's figure about that later. Right now, if you want to talk about winning more votes, especially young votes, what you have to do is start mobilizing the young men in our generation who, like I said, are disaffected with the feminism, with the wokeness. They don't like being demonized on such a regular basis, right? You need to go to all of them and collect their ballots, go to all of these kind of young male communities and get ballots, get votes, get people more invested into politics. But this is, right, exactly the problem, is that en masse, the GOP firstly doesn't really understand where the support is for them in Gen Z. What I've said for so long is that you need to go, right, to all of the frat houses. You need to find all the Andrew Tate fans, all the manosphere people, all of the kind of finance bro people who are very interested in entrepreneurship and starting their own business and stuff. That's also a growing movement in our generation, right, amongst young men. Even the Jordan Peterson fans who, believe it or not, there's a lot of people who like him that aren't even the most political. You need to go to kind of all these groups of young men and turn out ballots and get them, right? But this is the problem, is that the GOP doesn't really care. And honestly, en masse, all they often do is shame young men, right? They just call them stupid and ridicule them. And then we've kind of been in this controversy the past few weeks where I've been trying to tell people, look, like Andrew Tate, hate him. There's millions of young men out there who, if you handed him a ballot because of it, because they follow Andrew Tate, they would vote Republican. They agree with you on most things, but what do? We alienate them, shame them, ridicule them. This is, of course, overall the problem. We don't make an outreach. When we do make an outreach, it's tone deaf or it comes off as hostile. And this is the reason why you're not seeing this translate to the actual votes. I look at, so I go to school in a college town in the SEC, right? So this is a southern college town. And you see this, though, a lot of times. I look at some of these college towns in the South and in places like that, and they're overwhelmingly on the map electorally. They're overwhelmingly Democrat, right? I think Athens, Georgia goes like 70, 80% to the Democrats. I believe this was a statistic from the 2022 election. The Arizona State University campus went 96% for Katie Hobbs, right? And I look at it, I'm not exactly saying these universities, if everything was fair and everyone, all voted, that they would be majority conservative. But there is something to be said. I don't think the University of Georgia, kind of knowing that school, is like 70 to 80% liberal. I think there's a lot more conservatives, especially if you went to the frat houses and got their ballots, right? There's a lot more conservatives on that campus than you think. But what is the problem? The GOP doesn't understand that, and they certainly don't make an attempt to actually get their ballots. ASU, okay, I know that school has become more liberal over the years, but I still kind of know the people who go there. I know for a fact there's more than 4%, really, there's more than 4% of conservatives on that campus. But why did only 4% turn out? Because again, we're not making this appeal. We're not making an outreach to young men. And this is my message here today, which is that you absolutely have to make an outreach, right, to young men for a different number of reasons. First of all, of course, and this is just kind of math, it's simple facts. Gen Z is the future. Right? Statistically speaking, the Republican electorate is much older than the Democrat electorate. So naturally, if we don't make an outreach to younger people, what's going to happen? The Republican electorate's going to pass away, the Democrat electorate's going to run the country, and we're all screwed. So that's obviously mathematically, you understand why you have to make an outreach to Gen Z. And honestly, even if you don't win 51% of Gen Z overnight, you need to start planting the roots at the very least, right? Because people absorb stuff when they're early, when they're younger on, or maybe something they heard when they're younger starts to impact them when they're older. So my whole thing on that is if you're not at least trying to make an outreach to Gen Z now, that is a mistake. Because I know some people will say it's hopeless. You're not going to win young people anyway. It's not just about winning 51%. It's about planting the seeds, because who knows, right? As people get older, they and start families and all that stuff, they naturally start to develop more conservative tendencies. So you at least want to plant the seeds there, right? Because you go to a college campus, very often, all you feel is a liberal presence. You want to at least plant the seeds of a conservative presence, so that way maybe it grows and blossoms, right, into someone eventually being a conservative Republican. That's reason number one why it's so important, obviously, and I think most people understand why it's important to win young voters. Reason number two, though, I would say, is pay attention to who they polled here. They polled 12th grade boys, okay? So it's very great that they're identifying as conservative, and we love to see it. But these are boys who are just about to graduate from high school. Where are they going to go, many of them, after high school? College. What happens in college, as everyone knows, right? The infamous liberal indoctrination and all that stuff. So you can look at this now and think, oh, we got this, right? We're back. But if you don't if you don't try to make an appeal to these guys when they're in college, if you don't kind of solidify the roots of their conservative ideology, what's going to happen? They're going to be bombarded by the professors. They're going to be bombarded by everything and the pop culture and all that. And who knows, by the end of their senior year of college, this statistic probably won't look the way it does. So that is another reason why, right? You need to be making a play and fighting very hard for their votes and their support. Because again, if you don't solidify this now, you're going to be screwed over in the end. So these are all kind of the combined reasons why I think it is so important to capitalize on this now. Don't wait till they're 10 years from now, right? Capitalize on this now. Start making an outreach to young men, because young men, many of them, like I said, actually do feel disaffected by the system. And frankly, you know, everything I said earlier about young women, I mean, everyone's familiar with this guy by now. But frankly, a lot of young men out there are not very motivated by messaging like this,
Look,
right?
I have no problem with saying that Donald Trump and the MAGA movement are one of the biggest domestic threats to the United States right now. They're okay with insurrection. They try to overturn elections they didn't win. They overlook Donald Trump breaking laws. They're fine with bigotry. They encourage conspiracy theories and more. All of these ideas are antithetical to the United States and what we believe here. It's bad for the country. And to be honest, I don't care how much this angers the Republican Party. I'm not going to stop talking about this, and I know you folks won't either. Look,
So everyone's familiar with our friend Harry by now, I'd have to assume. But you know, ask yourself this, right? What did I say earlier about, you know, young men versus young women and why it's actually mostly young men who are conservative? I mean, be totally realistic. Who does this type of messaging appeal to, right? It appeals more so to young women. Right? This is why I say young men are disaffected by the politics, because young men don't look at someone like Harry Sisson and respect him or particularly want to follow him or his ideas. He is effeminate. He is a loser, right? Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? This is why conservatives need to make an appeal for all of the young men who don't sympathize with the feminism or the woke politics or all of this stuff. Last thing I want to say here, right, is kind of show you how real this movement of disaffected young men is. Because you might look at that poll and say, well, that's just a poll. Polls can be wrong. Maybe they took a weird sample, and perhaps that's a possibility. Don't get me wrong. I don't know if it's 100% accurate. What I will say, though, is, again, being a Gen Z man, I am 20 years old. I 100% also experience this sort of rising movement among other young men myself, okay? And here's what's very interesting. I wanted to show this here to wrap up. I got this message from someone. I graduated 2 years ago, okay, from high school. I guess technically 3 now, maybe 2. How do you do the math? It's just about, I'm a junior in college, so like 2 years ago, right? I guess math. Okay. Graduated 2 years ago, and at the time I was valedictorian. Some of you guys may know that I gave the controversial conservative valedictorian speech that all the liberals at my school wanted to cancel and all that stuff. And I faced a lot of crap, a lot of backlash for speaking up against Black Lives Matter and all that stuff in high school. Some of you guys who've been on this channel for a long time know about this. But I got this message the other day from someone who is currently a 12th grader and is about to graduate from my high school alma mater, and they basically told me this, right? There's this movement now. There's a bunch of teachers who were never political when I was in school. Now they're kind of speaking up against the woke stuff. And then this is what's big. A lot of the boys in my high school, apparently there's now, and this is in suburban Los Angeles. Let me be clear about that. This is in suburban Los Angeles. So if it's happening in LA, it's certainly happening everywhere, right? There's a movement of young men at the school who are now trending very conservative. And apparently they actually told me every single valedictorian after me who graduated was also conservative like myself. And that's what's interesting, right? Because the valedictorians before me were actually very mad at me and tried to cancel my speech because they were very liberal. I set the precedent, apparently. Now there's a bunch of conservative valedictorians after them. And then I brought up now, I said, well, who's the valedictorian this year? Who's it going to be? How do you know that they're going to be conservative? And this is what they said, right? It's still close, but someone from my friend group, because they're all the top 5. So the top 5 academic people at the school, all the ones potential valedictorians are all conservatives. So there's 100% going to be a conservative who gives the valedictorian speech. So just wanted to share that. And like I said, maybe partially I kind of set a trend at my own school, but I'm not going to take all the credit. I genuinely think there's a movement of young men, and you're seeing this more and more, who are trending conservative, who are kind of speaking up against this stuff. And like I said, if it's happening in LA, it's certainly happening at schools across the country. GOP, though, for once, please be competent. You have to do something about it, okay? You don't capitalize on it now, you are screwed. So capitalize on it, all right? But yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you are a young man or a young woman, are you experiencing this? You're noticing this in our generation? Let me know. Before you go, be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, consider joining the channel membership for exclusive perks, link in the description. And until next time, folks, alpha moves only. Everyone have a very good day. God bless and peace.